So now we're going to go into why did Kleiner Perkins invest in Google? Good back to back for Kleiner Perkins. So to kick off this section, I'm going to give you all an idea of what Google was like when Kleiner Perkins invested. And so I'm going to do this by going back to an excerpt in the Benchmark Capital episode that we did last week and just touch on why Benchmark passed on Google to give you an idea of what it was like. So here are 3 reasons why Benchmark passed. So it was 1999 and search engines were still in an ultra competitive environment with many questions regarding whether their business models actually made sense. And many search companies were starting and failing consistently, and it was beginning to look pretty murky. There were still many questions whether anybody could make a sustainable business out of search and if anyone could compete with Yahoo. And then, so number 2, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the co-founders, were 2 Stanford PhD students adamant about being CEO, despite never running a company before, which in late 1999 was extremely novel and gave many investors pause, including Benchmark. And so the third point, despite these 2 concerns, the price was still remarkably high. Bill Gurley, a former partner at Benchmark, also mentions how the founders were so confident in their product and their abilities that it actually gave the opposite impression to the Benchmark team, that these guys were maybe overselling themselves and may not be as exceptional as they seem. So that was Google, the 18th search engine built by 2 Stanford PhD students adamant about being CEO and demanding a very high valuation for their company that had yet to earn a dime. So tough sell. But John Doerr loved Google. So what did he see that Benchmark didn't? Well, as I mentioned in the Benchmark episode, Doerr looked past all of those initial concerns, on paper, and investigated the underlying technology, which blew him away. Like many Kleiner Perkins partners, as we touched on, Doerr was an engineer by training, so he could understand these entrepreneurs and engage with them better than most other venture capitalists. So there were 2 big reasons why John Doerr and Kleiner Perkins decided to invest in Google. The first, as I mentioned, was the underlying technology of the search engine. And so John Doerr once said, when talking about the decision to invest in Google, he said that, quote, "The first of which was their search engine was much better. This notion of PageRank, which was we're going to return results not based on keywords, but on how many pages point to the page or the answer in question, produced a demonstrably better experience." The second observation was, because of that, their numbers were off the chart. And so the growth rate was like anything we'd seen for any other service. And frankly, coming from the technology industries, from Intel, where John Doerr used to work, and networking companies, it didn't take a great leap of imagination to see that search, well done, could transform everything. End quote. So this notion of PageRank, which was derived from the founder's experience in academia, in which the prestige of an academic paper can be attributed to how many other research papers cite it. Therefore, the pages with the most websites linking to it must be the best pages to show the user. So this was a novel insight at the time and was a key factor in delivering a better search experience for their users. But again, like I said, Google was the 18th search engine. So could it really be that much better than the incumbents to capture enough market share to be a public company? Again, if you're starting from the 18th, pole, you have a ways to go to get to the top. So you have to be far and away better than all the companies ahead of you, or you're not going to be able to make it. And so former Kleiner Perkins partner and founder of Khosla Ventures, Vinod Khosla, who we will absolutely talk about more in a future episode on Coastal Ventures, whenever that happens, spectacular venture capital firm, he had this to say when describing the potential Google had to succeed in such a crowded market. Coastal once said, quote, "If you thought existing search technology was 90% as good as the best possible version, then pushing performance up to 95% was not going to win you customers. But if you thought there was more headroom, that existing search technology represented only 20% of the potential, then Google might be 3 or 4 times as good as its rivals, in which case its margin of engineering excellence would attract a flood of users." End quote. So PageRank convinced Doerr and Khosla that Google could actually be multiple times better than the current search leaders. It was built on exceptional technology, backed by two genius computer science doctoral candidates, and based on its growth rate, it was showing early signs of success. There were no indications that this would change, and all signs pointed to Google continuing to grow. So that was the first reason. The technology was spectacular. The second reason John had so much conviction in the Google investment was that, as we mentioned before, he believed in the potential of the internet far more than the average person. I mean, probably far more than the top 1% of believers. I mean, he really saw the potential in it. And he loved entrepreneurs who were ambitious and had lofty aspirations, just as Doerr thought himself. So, what's interesting is that the Google founders had even bigger expectations for the internet than Doerr and dreamed even bigger than Doerr, who was certainly one of the biggest believers in Silicon Valley on just the future and the acceleration of technology. And if you study Kleiner Perkins, you'll see that these two traits of just being more ambitious and a bigger dreamer than John Doerr himself is a great reason to back a company, great reason to back founders, just like we saw with Jeff Bezos, just like we're seeing now with Larry Page and Sergey Brin. So John tells the story of the first time Google came to pitch to him to invest. So right off the bat, he was already enamored by Google's just big and bold mission statement at the time, which was, quote, "We deliver the world's information in one click." That's just perfect. I love that mission statement. I totally see how John Doerr could be a sucker for that. And so, but what really sent John over the moon about this investment was when he engaged the founders regarding the market potential of Google. Having seen Yahoo's success and Google's potential after studying the technology, John thought they could attain a $1 billion market cap, which was really big in 1999. However, when he asked the founders about how valuable they thought their company could be, they blew Doerr's estimate out of the water. And so Doerr recalls the conversation by saying, quote, "I'll never forget my first conversation with Larry Page when I asked him how big Google would be, and he told me $10 billion. Remember now, this was around 1999. This is at a time when you still dialed up to get into the internet. I about fell out of my chair. I said, 'Larry, surely you mean market cap at 10 billion. He said, 'No, John, I mean revenues. Search today is just the very beginning. In fact, it's a very crummy experience. I want the search system to be able to answer any question that's asked of it, and indeed to anticipate what our users want to know.'" End quote. So $10 billion in revenues at the time would suggest a $100 billion market cap, which was 100 times higher than John Doerr's already ambitious expectations of a $1 billion market cap. And so the technology, the big and bold mission statement, and now just having 100 times the conviction and ambition than John Doerr was just the icing on the cake for him to make this investment. But Kleiner Perkins is a partnership, And John Doerr isn't the only decision maker. There are a lot of partners that need to be consulted with this investment decision. And funny enough, this was far from a unanimous decision at Kleiner Perkins. In fact, John Doerr had to advocate fairly strongly for the Google deal. Luckily for Kleiner Perkins, a core tenet today, and one I'd assume at the time, otherwise this Google investment wouldn't have been made, is to support non-consensus investment decisions, since the best investment decisions are non-consensus and right. So current Kleiner Perkins partner, Ilya Fushman, describes this principle as follows. He says, quote, "We're really partner conviction driven in the sense that any partner can come in and propose a deal. Our job as partners is again to test or reinforce that conviction, but we don't have a formal vote. In practice, the way it really settles out is you look across the room, and if everybody looks really skeptical, then they probably have a reason to be skeptical. But you could still do that deal. Now, you can only do that so many times because eventually, once you do a bunch of deals that nobody likes and they turn out to be bad, it's kind of shame on you. But a lot of times, you have the conviction and folks ask good questions and you still believe in it, so you do the deal. So we try to basically give people as much agency as possible to make these decisions because the best deals out there aren't obvious. They do typically come out of dissent and of discussion and some conflict because the obvious deals would be pretty obvious. So we try to foster that. End quote. So since a unanimous decision was not needed on this investment, and John Doerr, Kleiner's basically unofficial leader, had immense conviction on this deal, Kleiner ultimately invested $12 million for 12% of Google. And as you could guess, Google would turn out to be one of the best, if not the best, winners in Kleiner Perkins' long history. In 2004, when Google IPO'd, their stake was worth about $2,875,000,000. Google did not raise any more money after the Series A with Kleiner, and as we touched on in the Sequoia episode, with Sequoia participating in that round as well. Since search is one of the greatest business models ever, Google could just spit out cash flow, meaning they didn't need to raise more money from investors. So Kleiner could maintain their 12% ownership on just their $12 million of invested capital. So $12 million turning into $2.875 billion just 5 years later. Another ridiculous investment that had Kleiner return 240x on that initial 12 million and a 199% IRR. Certainly a spectacular investment, just defined by an incredible founder VC fit in understanding the potential of this product, both technically and financially. And so I love these types of investments where the founder and VC are perfectly aligned. And I'm sure these types of investments are the ones that all VCs really strive to make.